He was once a 16-year-old boy who made the whole world stop and listen. One song broke out, millions of records sold out, stages overflowed with screaming crowds, and the name Paul Anka appeared everywhere like a guarantee of absolute success. While most artists were still dreaming of their first hit, he was already at the top, writing music for himself and for the most powerful names of the century. But from that very moment, another spiral began to take shape, quietly, relentlessly, and cruelly. Paul Anka's career exploded too early, only to be turned away by the times when a new wave came crashing in. From teen idol, he was dismissed as outdated within just a few years. From a man who sold tens of millions of records, he entered a period of being dropped by labels, erased from radio, and treated by the market as someone who was already finished. He didn't collapse. Instead, Anka took another path, quietly taking control of his own music, writing for others, standing behind the spotlight, yet steering the entire game. But that success was never free. The non-stop flights, the endless nights on stage, the cold decisions made simply to survive, left deep cracks in his personal life. A man who wrote timeless love songs was constantly absent from his own family. A man who mastered the stage with perfect control became powerless in the face of a collapse that stretched on for decades. That is why Paul Anka's story is not just the history of famous songs, but a long battle between talent, ambition, and the price paid when success comes too early and stays too long. The tension between fame and the price it demands did not appear by accident. It was shaped early, born from a world where discipline, labor, and ambition always moved side by side long before fame had time to call his name. Paul Anka was born in 1941 in Ottawa, into a Lebanese immigrant family that was not wealthy but structured, steady in rhythm and order. His father, Andrew Anka, owned a small restaurant called Locanda, not a place of luxury, but a space built on constant work. That restaurant ran from morning until night, welcoming every kind of customer: local politicians, journalists, artists, working people. For Paul, it wasn't just where his father made a living. It was his first classroom in learning how people watch, how they connect, and how attention is claimed. He saw his father work without pause, remember the faces of regular customers, speak at the right moment, smile at the right time, real-life performance without a stage. His mother, Shamalea, carried Lebanese music into their small home through lullabies and folk melodies. Music was not taught as a skill. It seeped into everyday life, naturally and persistently. At St. Elijah Church within Ottawa's Syrian-Lebanese community, Paul began singing while still very young. Not to stand out, but because singing there was part of a collective ritual. That environment trained in him a sense of rhythm, discipline, and precision. One wrong note could throw the entire choir off. Even as a teenager, Paul was different from the other children around him. He didn't wait to be discovered. He taught himself piano and guitar, wrote music during class, formed a band in his family basement, and practiced late into the night beside crates of tomatoes stored for the restaurant. When he was still too young to perform legally, he found his own way past the barriers, offering to sing without pay, accepting police warnings, as long as he was allowed to stand on a stage. Those first performances did not bring meaningful money, but they gave him something more important: a sense of control over space and over an audience. Paul Anka's childhood, therefore, was shaped by an invisible pressure. He had to move fast, he had to go far, and he was not allowed to slow down. That rhythm pushed him into the adult world far too early, armed with a guitar, a stack of self-written songs, and the belief that if he didn't open doors himself, no door would ever be waiting. From those unpaid gigs and self-made stage openings, Paul Anka began an early leaving the nest, long before most children his age. He left Ottawa before he had time to grow up, carrying the recklessness of adolescence and one instinct that was crystal clear. If he stayed, life's rhythm would slow down. Los Angeles, then New York, appeared not as promised lands, but as a chain of doors that opened and closed unpredictably. The first auditions passed in silence. The early recordings made no impact. The polite nods from industry people often ended with endless waiting. But in those rare encounters, he learned the structure of the game, who controlled the harmony, who held the broadcast schedule, who decided whether a song would be allowed to live or not. Don Costa and ABC Paramount did not arrive like a miracle. They arrived at the right moment, when Anka had become tough enough not to step back after rejection. The turning point came from teenage trembling. Diana was not born from a complete love story, but from the confusion of a boy facing a girl who was almost a stranger, a silhouette enlarged by youthful imagination. That incompleteness was exactly what made the song reach the masses. Simple lyrics, a melody easy to remember, emotions delivered openly without defense. When the record was released, the reaction didn't build gradually. It erupted. The charts changed color in a short time. Sales surged into the millions. Different countries all spoke the name of a teenager who hadn't even graduated yet. Album after album followed. Awards and packed touring schedules flooded his desk so fast there was no space left to breathe. Fame arriving early meant his life began to be driven by the tour schedule. Flights piled up, shows overlapped, interviews repeated the same questions. Everything pushed his rhythm far beyond the self-adjustment capacity of a 16 or 17-year-old. Paul Anka became a global teen idol, but privacy shrank day by day. The thrill of the crowd came with a quiet exhaustion. The faster the music ran, the further family time fell behind. That contradiction did not explode immediately. It accumulated silently, covered by applause and stage lights, laying the foundation for a struggle that would follow him for decades. Between having to keep accelerating just to avoid being left behind, and the price paid when he could no longer turn back in time. Before the wave called Diana had even settled, Paul Anka was pulled into another, harsher rotation. How not to become a disposable product of the very success he created. By the late 1950s, the music industry was already getting used to consuming young faces quickly. A single hit could lift someone high, but it could also trap them forever as the boy from that one summer. Anka understood this earlier than most, and he responded not by running from the teen idol image, but by expanding it from the inside. From 1958 into the early 1960s, songs like Put Your Head on My Shoulder, Lonely Boy, and Puppy Love appeared on the radio with relentless frequency. On the surface, they were still simple, easy love songs written for young audiences. But the songwriting structure had changed. The melodies were more carefully calculated. The lyrics didn't just express feelings, they created a clear narrative rhythm with peaks and pauses. Anka was no longer writing like a boy, confused because he liked someone. He was writing like someone who understood exactly what 3 minutes on a radio broadcast needed to do to the listener's ear. These recordings didn't just sell, they stayed on the charts, proving it wasn't repeated luck, but a craft taking shape. At the same time as he stood at the microphone, Anka spent more and more time at the desk. He observed how harmonies were built, how producers adjusted tempos to fit different markets, how a song could keep living after leaving its original voice. In the studio, he was no longer the young singer who arrived on time and left. He stayed, listening again, fixing every small detail. In this phase, professionals began to see him differently. No longer just a record-selling face, Anka was spoken of as someone who understood the structure of a hit, someone who could create a song, not merely perform it. That shift did not happen loudly, but it came with heavy psychological pressure. The more he proved he was serious as a writer, the more he had to work to avoid being seen as someone trying to escape the teen idol label. The touring schedule remained brutal. The record label's expectations still centered on sales. Meanwhile, his need to be recognized as a real musician grew stronger. That internal struggle forced Anka to mature faster than his age, learning how to make a song stand, even when the stage lights went out, and laying the first brick for an even bigger transition, writing hits for other voices as well, without needing his own name on the record cover. Once he had secured himself as a songwriter, not merely a face in front of the camera, Paul Anka began leaving fingerprints whose historical weight even he could not yet foresee. In late 1958, while still seen as a teen symbol, Anka wrote, "It Doesn't Matter Anymore" for Buddy Holly. The song carried a tone completely different from what audiences were used to hearing from him. Slow, resigned, no longer the heat of first love, but the feeling of accepting a loss that had already happened. Not long after, Buddy Holly died in a plane crash. The song suddenly became an unintended farewell, climbing the charts in an atmosphere of mourning. Instead of treating it as an unexpected source of income, Anka quietly transferred all the royalties to Holly's widow. The decision was not publicized, required no statement, but within the industry, it drew a sharp moral line. For him, music was not merely a transaction. Entering the early 1960s, as American television became the cultural center of each evening, Anka appeared again in a different position, invisible, yet enduring. He wrote and shaped the theme music for The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson. Short, bright, instantly recognizable from the first notes, it repeated night after night for decades. Without his name on screen, that music slipped into the habits of millions of American families, becoming part of the nation's daily rhythm. In his early 20s, Anka had already placed his work into a space where personal fame was no longer a requirement, where a melody strong enough could outlive any image. By the late 1960s, as he moved deeper into the world of grown men, another milestone emerged. From the French melody Comme d'habitude, Anka rewrote the entire English lyric, not translating it, but resurrecting it. My Way did not tell a specific story. It built a spiritual portrait, looking back at one's life without apology, without explanation. When Frank Sinatra delivered the song, it burst past the boundaries of a hit and became a declaration. For Anka, this was not only professional success, it was an inner transition. From writing for youth to writing for legacy, from conquering the charts to touching something culturally durable, where each line carried an entire lifetime inside it. After My Way, Paul Anka did not enter an era of stability. He stepped straight into an earthquake. Within only a few years, the old order of pop music was overturned. The British invasion flooded America with the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, music louder, more rebellious, young in a completely different way. The teen idols of the previous decade suddenly became outdated after a single summer. Radio changed its playlists, audiences changed their taste, and for Anka, who had dominated the charts before he was even old enough to drink, it was the moment of realization. If he stayed still, he would be swept away. Anka's first reflex was not to chase the new trend, but to step back and seize control. He shifted his center of gravity toward writing for others, where the name could fade, but the power would not. Publishing rights, exploitation rights, the right to decide whether a song lived or died, things record labels had tightly held, became what he was determined to keep in his own hands. When the teen idol image stopped being an advantage, Anka repositioned himself as a musical architect, a man who could build hits for any voice, any generation, so long as he understood the structure of the market. By the early 1970s, that adaptation began to pay off in visible ways. In 1970, She's a Lady was created for Tom Jones. The song carried a showy masculine energy, almost the complete opposite of the shy love songs that had once made Anka's name. When Tom Jones roared it on stage, the track shot up international charts and became one of the biggest hits of Jones's career. For Anka, it wasn't merely a professional revival, it was proof that he could still read the crowd's psychology. Only now, the crowd had grown older, bolder, and no longer wanted to hear teenage whispers. Before that wave could settle, Anka pushed himself into another storm. In the mid-1970s, he duetted with Odia Coates on You're Having My Baby. The song became a massive commercial hit, blanketing radio, yet it also struck directly at a society already tense in the aftermath of Roe v. Wade. The lyrics were fiercely criticized, dismissed as outdated, patriarchal, some even called it reactionary. Anka, by then fully accustomed to the lights, understood exactly what he was trading. A song could feed a career and at the same time damage a public image. But he did not retreat. He accepted the collision, accepted the controversy closing in around him, because for him, silence was the real sign of being eliminated. In the middle of those counterwaves, Paul Anka continued to survive not through nostalgia, but through the ability to read the era, even when the era was no longer gentle with him. After the controversies surrounding You're Having My Baby in 1974, Paul Anka did not retreat from the spotlight. He changed terrain. From the mid-1970s onward, Las Vegas became the place where he appeared more consistently than in any other city, not as a celebrity guest, but as someone who had staked his claim on the stage. Week-long runs at the Sands, the Sahara, then Caesars did not require loud promotion. Audiences came because they knew exactly what awaited them, a man who controlled the room from the first second, never letting the night slip out of his hands. By the early 1980s, when many idols of his era had already vanished from major performance schedules, Anka was still there. Steady, punctual, with a show structure that barely changed. Vegas gave him what radio could no longer guarantee: stable power. No longer forced to chase new hits, he built authority through precision. The band was not allowed to improvise with emotion. Entrances, pitch, lighting, and the duration of each song were all tightly controlled. For Anka, the stage was not a place for compromise. It was a space that had to obey. That philosophy led to an incident in 1985. During rehearsals for a Vegas show, an internal recording capturing Anka's furious outburst at the band was leaked. The shouting, the demands for absolute discipline, the uncompromising attitude spread quickly through the performance world, then moved beyond professional circles into a widely repeated story. The image of the man who wrote My Way, a symbol of personal freedom, collided head-on with another man, cold, rigid, obsessed with control. But the leak did not make Anka disappear from Vegas. On the contrary, he continued performing in the years that followed as if there were nothing to apologize for. For him, the issue was never that the anger had been heard. It was whether the stage functioned to standard. And Vegas, the city of unspoken discipline and silent power, remained the only place fully willing to accept that kind of artist. Someone who outlasted trend cycles, but paid for it with loneliness inside the very power he held. From that Vegas foundation, Paul Anka did not seal himself inside a single territory. By the late 1980s, firmly rooted in the Vegas ecosystem and no longer dependent on the American charts, he began expanding his performance space beyond borders in a way very different from his teen idol years. From 1987 on, he appeared increasingly often in Italy, France, Monaco, and many other European cities, not as a temporary phenomenon, but as an artist with a songbook built to last. These nights were no longer driven by relentless touring speed, but by stability. Audiences came for memory, stayed for performance quality, and returned for a rare sense of familiarity that contemporary pop no longer offered. Alongside international stages, Anka had maintained a steady presence in television and film early on, but it became more visible in the period from the early 1990s. He appeared in movies, sitcoms, talk shows, game shows, sometimes as a guest role, sometimes simply as himself, like a familiar symbol of American popular culture. These appearances were not meant to reassert fame, but to keep tempo. Anka did not disappear, nor did he fight for the spotlight. He stood on the line between an old legend and a living man. The year 2005 marked a late but important turning point. At 64, Anka released Rock Swings, a project deliberately moving against the current. Instead of chasing contemporary music, he pulled songs by Nirvana, Oasis, and Soundgarden back into the swing and big band structures he mastered. This was not an attempt to make himself younger, but an act of redefinition. Any generation's music can be translated backward into a classical musical language if the arranger understands structure well enough. The album did not create a commercial frenzy, but it helped Anka be seen again as an artist who still had creative thinking, not merely someone living off legacy. By 2020, another life cycle of Anka's music unexpectedly opened. Fragments of his songs appeared on TikTok, used by younger generations who didn't need to know the historical context behind them. No campaign, no image control, no comeback statement, only music finding a new path on its own. For Anka, it was a familiar paradox. The closer he came to the end of life, the less control he had over how his work was consumed. And yet that very loss of control was what allowed it to keep living. That professional expansion did not happen in a vacuum. As Paul Anka increasingly tied his life to international stages, with dense travel rhythms and nights of back-to-back performances, one personal relationship quietly entered his orbit as well. At first as an anchor, then gradually becoming the greatest point of tension between private life and professional ambition. In late 1962, at a time when Anka had already moved beyond the teen idol image and was stepping deeper into the adult world of entertainment, he met Anne de Zogeb. Anne was a model from a distinguished Middle Eastern family, carrying with her a composure, a sense of order, and a rhythm of life completely different from the touring world Anka had grown used to. Their meeting did not have the color of an explosion, but it quickly created a rare feeling of familiarity for someone who had been living under lights and public scrutiny far too early. Long conversations, non-stop flights, hurried letters written between performance schedules pushed the relationship forward rapidly, as if both of them understood that Anka's time would never wait. They married in 1963, during the period when Anka was reshaping himself from a youth phenomenon into an artist with deeper professional weight. The marriage immediately entered a rhythm unlike any other. Home was a hotel, dinner was an airport, and family time was always cut into fragments by tour schedules. In the years that followed, 5 daughters were born, one after another. Alexandra, Amanda, Alicia, Anthea, Amelia, each name marking a different stage in the career of a father who was always in transit. Anne became the silent axis of the household, stabilizing schooling, maintaining daily routines, shielding the children from the cyclone of fame surrounding them from the time they were very young. Distance did not arrive through loud scandals. It accumulated through absences, birthdays with an empty chair, school performances retold over the phone. Anka still brought the children along on tours, trying to stitch the role of father into an artist's schedule. But that rhythm soon revealed its limits. As the children grew older, the absence became clearer, no longer something that could be compensated by gifts or short visits. Anne remained with the family's real everyday life, while Anka continued to be pulled back toward the stage, the place he knew he had to stand if he did not want to disappear. The tension lasted for years, never erupting into public conflict, yet deep enough to erode the structure of the marriage. Separations and reunions, repeated attempts to balance responsibility and passion, eventually could not defeat a rhythm that had been shaping their lives for too long. In 2000, after nearly 4 decades together, the marriage closed. No scandal, no accusations, only the quiet sense of loss of a family that had tried to survive beside a career that never stood still. Anne never entered another marriage and lived quietly until her death in 2017, leaving behind 5 daughters and a chapter of life inseparable from the man who devoted his entire life to music. The silence left behind after that long marriage with Anne did not end with the adults. It spread to 5 children, each growing up with the same famous surname, yet moving in different directions, as individual forms of self-protection after a childhood forced to share their father with the stage. Alexandra, the eldest daughter, moved far away from Hollywood from the beginning, not out of rebellion, but out of choice. When lights and touring schedules had covered most family memories, she sought more stable structures, serious education, law, a quiet career behind the scenes. Alexandra's life unfolded largely in Europe, where the name Anka was no longer a passkey or a shadow. There, she existed as an independent individual, outside the fame orbit that shaped her childhood. Amanda moved in the opposite direction. She entered Hollywood, first as an actress, then gradually shifting into producing, a position that offered more control rather than standing in front of the camera. Her marriage to Jason Bateman brought her into a different kind of film family, private, practical, disciplined. In Paul's memory, the most meaningful moment was not a red carpet or an award ceremony, but the father-daughter dance at her wedding, a rare stretch of time not invaded by touring schedules or stages, where the role of father did not have to come second to the artist. Alicia chose a path that seemed softer, yet carried a very clear reflex. She stepped away from entertainment to pursue wellness, yoga, coaching, spaces built around presence, listening, and slow rhythm. Growing up in a household where time was always cut into pieces, the search for balance became a survival need, not a trend. Alicia built her life around what childhood had lacked: inner stability. Anthea stood between the two worlds. She wrote, created, worked on scripts, and for a period even sang duets with her father, not as a commercial project, but as an attempt to touch the bond again through the family's most familiar language: music. After Anne's death, Anthea wrote a blog in tribute to her mother. Quiet words, yet clear in revealing the role of the woman who kept the family standing while the father kept moving. Writing became her way of reconnecting the unfinished pieces. Amelia was the most private of all. She focused on her own family, stayed away from attention, living as if the surname Anka were simply a biographical detail, not destiny. The rare moment the public brushed against that world came when granddaughter Anessa sang "My Way" with her grandfather. Not on a major stage, but in a family educational setting. The song, once tied to Paul's personal journey, in that moment became an intergenerational thread, no longer about the artist's ego, but about memory being passed on. When the family bond seemed to have finally stabilized around grown children and a less frantic rhythm of life, Paul Anka entered a relationship entirely different in both pace and intensity. Anna Oberg appeared in his life in the early 2000s, much younger than him, carrying the image of a dynamic woman focused on fitness, personal discipline, and direct presence. Their meeting did not happen in a context of nostalgia or shared memory, But at a moment when Paul Anka was trying to reassert control over his private life after the end of a marriage that had lasted nearly 4 decades, the relationship developed fast, so fast that it left behind the silences that had once existed in his earlier emotional life. The wedding took place in 2008, carrying expectations of a late but fuller beginning. A man who had lived by touring schedules, believing he could be both a husband and a father again. Ethan's birth did not only reshape the family structure, it pulled Paul Anka back into a role he had once lost years earlier because of distance and time. Becoming a father in his 60s came with a different color. Fewer stages, more presence, more effort to keep the family within reach. That marriage, however, did not operate at the rhythm he had hoped for. Generational differences, financial pressure, control, and the way each person imagined their role inside the family gradually became irreconcilable. Private space was quickly dragged into public view as conflict escalated. Accusations, lawsuits, and sworn statements appeared in legal records, exposing a short marriage layer by layer before the media. The divorce in 2010 did not close the tension. It opened another battle that lasted for years, centered on child custody. During that period, Paul Anka was no longer a stage icon, but a father facing the risk of losing daily presence in his son's life. Hearings, psychological evaluations, and private details placed on a legal scale exhausted him in a way completely different from touring years. When the final ruling granted him custody in 2017, it was not a victory to celebrate, but a state of survival that had just been preserved. From that relationship, Paul Anka emerged with the only role that still felt certain: being Ethan's father. In the years that followed, his life narrowed around raising his son, protecting his health, and maintaining a clear distance from new emotional entanglements. No longer searching for compensation, no longer gambling on romantic restarts. The relationship with Anna Oberg left in him a deeper kind of fatigue, where love, power, and the fear of loss collided directly, without time or compromise softening the impact. After years worn down by legal conflict and a constant state of vigilance, Paul Anka entered another relationship with an entirely changed mindset. Lisa Pemberton appeared when his life had already narrowed, no longer revolving around a dense stage schedule or impulsive decisions, but around a slower, stricter rhythm focused on keeping what remained from collapsing further. Their meeting carried no explosive rush, no immediate passion sweeping him away. It unfolded quietly, in the context of a man long accustomed to losing control, trying to believe that stability could still be built late in life. The marriage was formalized in 2016. No spectacle, no noise, like a choice of repair rather than a beginning. In the years of living together, Paul Anka's life became far more private. He reduced public appearances, scaled down performance commitments, spent most of his time at home, trying to maintain a steady daily structure. There were no children in this marriage, and that absence was both a relief in responsibility and a sign that the relationship was built on a different foundation. Companionship, rather than building a family in the traditional sense. Outward quiet did not mean inner harmony. The age gap, differences in how each faced pressure, and the cracks not yet healed from previous relationships gradually entered daily life. Paul Anka stepped into this marriage carrying a long history of control and discipline, traits that had helped him survive on stage but became heavy in private space. Lisa Pemberton, on the other hand, did not accept living in the shadow of that past. Disagreements did not erupt into public conflict. They accumulated in silence, long, persistent, making shared life tense and exhausting. Around 2020, looking back at his age and realizing time no longer allowed him to endure a marriage without peace, Paul Anka chose to stop. The decision to end the relationship did not come from a single incident, but from the prolonged erosion of helplessness in the very life he was trying to hold together. The separation happened quietly. No disputes, no children pulled into legal chaos, but it left behind another kind of emptiness. The feeling that even after slowing down, he still could not find a place where he could truly stop. From the relationship with Lisa Pemberton, Paul Anka emerged with a colder awareness of his own limits. No longer believing in marriage as a structure of salvation, no longer holding the illusion that life experience automatically creates harmony, he closed that door with both exhaustion and clarity. What remained was kept to a minimum: the role of father, the habit of work, and a private life protected by distance, where emotion was no longer allowed to lead decisions that had become matters of survival. Entering 2025, Paul Anka's rhythm of life continued to narrow in a way that was distinctly his. He did not disappear, but he also no longer placed himself at the center of any cycle. After his marriages ended, and after choosing to withdraw deeply from public romantic life, his professional activity in this period unfolded almost entirely behind the curtain. There was no fixed touring schedule, no tour announcement, no new album. Any stage appearances, if they happened at all, were highly selective, tied to private invitations or small engagements where physical demands, time, and control remained firmly in his hands. Anka focused his attention on the massive catalog he had built over more than 6 decades, reviewing copyrights, controlling licensing for film, advertising, and digital platforms, intervening directly in how old recordings were refreshed, remixed, or re-released. At this age, he no longer wrote to chase the market, but to ensure that the songs bearing his name would not drift away from the context he believed was right. It was a form of quiet labor, one that required strict discipline, reflecting the instinct for control that had followed him from the Las Vegas stage into private life. The year 2025 also saw Paul Anka's name continue to be pulled back by younger audiences in a way he did not actively create. Old songs appeared densely across social media platforms, clipped and reused in contexts completely different from the time they were born, forcing him to intervene from a distance to retain the final right of decision. He did not join media campaigns built around that wave, did not appear to explain or retell the legend. He remained only what he had become, the gatekeeper of his own legacy. In private space, Paul Anka's 2025 routine stayed closely tied to fatherhood, health care, and the maintenance of steady work habits. Separated from the lights, music still existed every day, but it was no longer applause, no longer crowded stages. It was quiet decisions behind the scenes, where he continued to do what he had always known best: control the tempo, keep order, and refuse to let life slip out of his hands one more time. Paul Anka leaves behind a legacy that cannot be contained in charts or sales numbers. It lies in the way his music threaded through multiple layers of life, from the impulsive teenage fever of the 1950s to studio rooms where songs were tailored for other voices, to Las Vegas stages where discipline and control became measures of value. He was not only a man who wrote melodies that crowds could sing along to, he was a man who understood early that the real power in the industry lives in authorship, holding the song before it becomes memory for millions. From Diana, which opened the door to fame before he was even old enough to become an adult, to My Way, which turned into a global confession that outgrew the shadow of the writer, Paul Anka was always present at the intersections where popular culture changed direction. That legacy also carries scars that do not fade easily. Success arriving too early forced him to grow up at a speed few could endure. Professional endurance was paid for with long family absences. The artist's ego forged through steel discipline sometimes became a weight for those standing beside him. Yet those contradictions are exactly why Anka's story is not smooth, not polished. It resembles real life more than legend. When his songs continue to be sung by new generations, when an old musical fragment suddenly wakes up inside a modern platform, what remains is not only nostalgia, but a cold lesson in how to survive long-term in an industry that loves to forget its old names. At the end of the journey, Paul Anka does not need to be framed as a perfect legend. His value lies in having lived through many roles: star, writer, controller, controversial figure, without abandoning music. The songs continue to walk their own roads beyond the man who created them. And there, Paul Anka's legacy stands as a reminder. Fame may arrive early or late, but only those who understand its structure remain long enough to hear themselves sung again, on their own terms. If you've ever sung along to a Paul Anka song without even remembering where you first heard it, if you've ever realized a familiar melody has followed you through different chapters of your life, if you've ever heard "My Way" and understood it was never just a song, leave a line here for the man who spent an entire lifetime writing music that outlived the very era that made him. And if you want to keep exploring the real people behind the spotlight, the difficult choices behind fame, support the channel, so we still have enough reason to keep telling stories that deserve to be faced head-on.